Jay Byers.
You guys ready for us? Or do we
Oh,
need to have the lights?
I jumped. I seen, wait a minute.
I think, there we go.
Okay.
I think we're ready now.
It's 5 o'clock. We've had a study session tonight conducted by Assistant City Manager Jay Byers.
Mayor and Commissioners, I appreciate your sitting in early for a study session today. I wanted to go over 5 ordinances that are before you tonight. 3 of them are franchise agreements and 2 are network service agreements. All right. The franchise agreements allow telecommunications companies to do business in Pittsburgh. Right? They set guidelines for the interaction between the companies and the city, permitting, coordination with other utilities, those kind of things. It sets out time frames, a lot of contractual stuff, maintenance requirements, you know, insurance, indemnification, things like that. So that's what you'll see in the franchise agreements. The network services agreements lay out the guidelines for use of the networks provided by Crawcan and Optic, which is part of Columbus Telephone Company. And those network services agreements provide access to the city, identify the obligations on both sides related to use of that network, defines what services will be provided, maintenance, those kind of things. Also, the network services agreements also set standards for the performance of the network as well. Right. So I just wanted to kind of lay out to you what those agreements mean and what they are. And what this means for the city, what we have are 3 competent technology companies that have long histories, all right, and they have extensive resources and powerful relationships in the telecommunications world, all right, and they're going to be able to provide services in Pittsburgh, all right, and that's a big deal for us, all right. That puts us on the technology map, all right, that we have multiple providers with this level of capability, all right. There's a few new things that are in these agreements, or things that are a little bit unusual from franchise agreements. One of them is that in the franchise agreements, the city will be able to participate in the fiber planning and be able to add capacity for itself. In other words, the city of Pittsburgh is going to be able to provide some fiber capacity as they come in and start putting in fiber optic lines in Pittsburgh. Right? That's a bit different. There's also clauses in the franchise agreements that ensure that the providers will treat all cities the same and that the city will treat all providers the same. Those are called most favored nation clauses, MFN clauses, and those are in the agreements as well. A little bit different than your typical franchise agreements. The network services agreements allow the city to access the networks of Crawcan and Optic to connect to our regional anchor institutions, primarily our public safety institutions outside of Pittsburgh. All right? And that allows Pittsburgh to be able to share some of that technology with some of those jurisdictions that might otherwise be able to afford what Pittsburgh can afford. All right? So those are some of the new things that are in these agreements, and that's kind of one of the things it means. It really positions Pittsburgh as a place with multiple internet providers, multiple redundant internet providers, okay? And that makes us more attractive for businesses, and it gives options for the citizens and the businesses in the future. Now, and I'm trying to keep this short, all right, and I do have the 3 providers are all represented here. So if you have specific questions for them, we can answer those, or if you have specific questions for me about those agreements, that we'd like to hear from you.
I need a quick vocabulary lesson.
Yes, ma'am.
What does fiber capacity mean to you?
It means additional strands of fiber optic cable.
So physically more strands.
That's correct. Or access to someone else's strands that we could use for our purposes.
And where are these located?
Right now, none of them have fiber lines in Pittsburgh. They're all waiting for these agreements to go through to start putting those fiber lines in. Okay.
And then when you checked yourself and said multiple redundant internet providers, why is redundant important?
If you're doing business nowadays, you have to, almost everybody relies on the internet in some capacity or other, particularly larger businesses. If the internet goes down in a company, it's usually very traumatic for them, right? So when you have an internet connection, you really want to have more than one to make sure your business is up and running all the time. So that if a line gets cut somewhere, your business isn't shut down or severely hampered. All right. So multiple redundant internet providers is something that the businesses in Pittsburgh have been talking to me about for a long time. You don't want to have just one pipe to the internet. You want to have multiple pipes, multiple ways to get to the internet so that you're not hurt if something happens to one of those connections.
And right now we just have one?
Well, we have more than one, all right, but we have two primary ones, and the businesses have asked for more.
And we have two primary because we've only allowed two in as a city?
Nope, that's just the two that have come. All right, there's no allowing. We would gladly welcome any others. In fact, we are gladly allowing others to come in. That's what we're doing tonight.
But to date, nobody's asked.
That's correct. The Pittsburgh market is not of a huge size. We're big enough to be served by some of the primary providers, but not by any of you, not by others.
And recently I was in Kansas City and doing some business, and everywhere I saw, we have Google Fiber.
Yes.
So how is that, and what is that contextually with what we're talking about here for us? It appeared to be a good thing.
It is a good thing. Google has provided in Kansas City gigabit speed, which is very fast broadband internet in selected areas in Kansas City. And so it's kind of a big deal if you have Google in your neighborhood or in your business area. It really allows for unlimited growth for those businesses with that level of capacity for the internet. The providers here are, while they're not Google, right, they are certainly competent and able to provide very fast internet speeds that will probably be adequate for our businesses in the foreseeable future.
So same kind of work.
It is definitely the same kind of work. These people are telecommunications providers like Google is, all right, in Kansas City. And they're providing, you're going to see them laying fiber optic lines all around the city and making connections to businesses and potentially to the individuals.
So all these lines will be able to cross over if, one goes down, a business will be able to go on to another one, or
Well, not all.
as long as they have the service.
Now, these three people will be, in essence, competitors.
Right.
Okay, so they're not necessarily going to be sharing lines, all right? But they're building their own networks that will be redundant, and they're building them through Pittsburgh, which is ideal for us.
And these lines will already be laid and utility easements that we already have as a city.
Yes, we've already begun negotiating where those lines are going to be run, kind of talking to them about where the congestion is in our right-of-way. We've been working together really in a partnership to decide what are the best routes, and I've been told that they're ready to go. All right.
Okay. From a planning standpoint, you talked about us participating in the planning. What conversations have you had related to that, and are you thinking about looking at the city in quadrants or in sections, or how are you, when you talk about planning and how that will take place, maybe you can expand on that?
Typically, what you're doing when you're planning out fiber optic installations is you're looking for it's a network. So you have trunk lines and then lines that go off from the trunk lines. Right now, we're in the trunk line discussion phase, right, which is where you will put in your larger lines that you could potentially branch off to smaller lines later on. Where we've been meeting with all three of these providers right now. They've been sharing their plans for where they plan on putting their trunk lines, and the city has been making some decisions based on its future ideal state about where we would like to co-locate with some of the lines that they're providing. Just to we'll share some costs. It'd be considerably cheaper if we do it with them. So we've been sitting down and comparing trunk lines at this point. That's where we are.
What's the timing? I mean, what are we talking about in terms of getting these in and having something that's usable by the consumer, by the businesses or other citizens?
Well, I've been told, as I said, that they're ready to go, but why don't I let them tell you? Craig, you want to?
Craig Wilbert, I'm the general manager.
Craig, they have to hear you.
Craig Wilbert, I'm the general manager for Crawcan, and we're all kind of in a similar boat here. But yeah, the trunk lines will go in first. That's a 45 to 60 day probably contract, depending on weather. Gets us from the southwest side of Pittsburgh up to the industrial park, and then we'll be building off that with additional lines to serve pretty much the entire business community. We're also taking care of Frontenac simultaneously, so we'll be coming in from the north, Frontenac. We'll be coming in from the west to the airport. Crawcan currently surrounds the city of Pittsburgh with fiber cable and fiber to the home type services. About 15 counties, about 12,000 customers. We serve the towns that the big AT&T types don't, and that goes back 50 to 100 years. So it's just time for us to move into town. After that, we'll be building a Phase 1 build in residential communities, both in Frontenac and in Pittsburgh. We'll be providing some maps to the city to line that out and get all that planned out. Our initial Phase 1 is to hopefully build out to approximately 1,000 to 1,500 homes this year. And then, depending on the success rate and the take rate and just how the construction goes, we'll build out further from there. And I'm glad you mentioned Google, because I really think what we're bringing is a very similar product to Google, including their pricing. So that's a big advantage to a city like Pittsburgh, because Google's building in Kansas City and Provo and cities like that. You don't see that in a town the size of Pittsburgh. So I'm glad to answer any of the questions.
When you're laying your trunk line, how much is that going to inconvenience people getting around town?
No more than any other utility work. I mean, we'll be going through, we'll be going up past the Pittsburgh Ford dealer, up around the mall. Then we'll be going right through the middle of town, right down through Pitt State, up where by the middle school, and then on up and connect to the industrial park. So, there will be some, but it's supposed to be a pretty quick project. When we get into residential communities, all this is going to be buried. There's no aerial cable. So while there's a little more work to get buried done, it certainly saves you in the long time, and customers appreciate it a lot more. It's a lot more reliable and not as susceptible to wind or ice storms or anything like that.
So you bore?
All board, including in residential areas.
And for the other two groups, is the timeline roughly the same for you guys as well? Okay. If you guys want to.
Good evening. My name's Trish Carroll, and I'm with Optic Communications. And basically, we would like to be realistic with our timeline. We're looking at probably about a 120-day build-out. Our route will originate in Frontenac and come down from Frontenac down Rouse Street, and will terminate at Via Christi. We'd like to basically underpromise and overdeliver. So we want to be realistic with the time frame and the weather that we'll be going into in the fall and winter. We will be offering very competitive pricing. With our network, we have 2 ISP backbone providers. So we are not only geographically redundant, but we are what's called backhaul, or the internet pipe to the consumer, redundant. So in the event that one of our primary, what we call tier 1, like AT&T providers would have a fiber cut, it would automatically roll over to the second provider. So we recognize the importance of redundancy in the network. We will be offering speeds up to 1 gig based on customer demand. And again, we feel that they will be, comparably priced with other competitors in the area.
Other than internet, and what other services will be provided to these?
At this point, we have some specialized services that I might like to have our plant manager, Gene Hamilton, kind of explain to you a little bit, that are more business specific, if that's okay.
Hello, I'm Gene with Columbus Telephone, Optic Communication. Our main goal to start with is the big business customers, to make cost work out and to provide dedicated service to them, because they can have no outages whatsoever. We do have optic rings, fiber rings to the far southern counties that hopefully will work out well for the city of Pittsburgh, for the law enforcement stuff that may be coming up, and a lot of bare fiber leases that instead of even doing electronics or speed, that people want to lease raw fibers to go from one point to another. I guess I'm open to whatever questions you guys have. The weather is always tough. I mean, we've kicked around our time frame, when to do this, who can forecast the weather for rain, and all the other stuff coming up.
You've mentioned both residential and business. Is there one that you're planning on starting with and then growing, or are they simultaneous? Or
we will most definitely start with business first, and work our way into the residential on, kind of like Google does. They certify an area for the take rate so you can make a business case.
What's the process for that going to be like?
The process of that, in the past, we've had lots of websites and stuff that we get the community in certain areas to apply, so we get at least a 50% take rate, because you can't build fiber out and promise all these utilities if you don't have subscribers paying for them at the bottom line.
The take rate is an important statistic here when they're deciding what areas to serve. It costs them, of course, to build out fiber to a certain area, and they want to make sure a certain percentage of the potential customers out there are interested in using that service, and that's the take rate, the percentage of customers in an area that will be using the service. And the take rate usually has to be not insubstantial for them to justify it, the cost. So anyway, I just wanted to explain that term that they've used.
Any other questions you guys have?
I have one more for Jay,
Okay.
but
Thanks.
thanks for also adding, when you talked about other entities, do we currently have discussions ongoing with other municipalities, other safety? Is there anything you can expand on that wouldn't be, something that we can share?
We're focusing primarily on public safety institutions right now. We're currently working with the county, Crawford County. They're interested in purchasing the jail module to the system we just recently purchased. So we're going to be working with them to arrange that purchase. They also are interested in us hosting all of the application and using our new application themselves, so they don't have to buy a new one. So that would mean that we would provide the application to them, but to be able to do that reliably, we're going to have redundancy in there. But to do that reliably, you have to have a fiber optic connection to that site, and that's in Crawcan. We've been working with Crawcan to provide that connection. So they're going to be actually using our public safety system that we're currently implementing. One of the reasons we bought the public safety system we have is because it allows multiple jurisdiction installations, and we are turning our installation into a multiple jurisdiction installation. We've also had discussions with the Columbus and Cherokee County as well. So we're looking at really creating a regional public safety system where we can share records and even potentially dispatching information as well.
Is that something where we have to enter into and I might not be using the right term, but like a license agreement that goes, we have our own license agreement, and then we have to sub-license, if you will, with the other municipality, or does it go through our license, or how does that work?
Because we purchased the multiple jurisdiction version of this application, we can act as the host for the other ones without any sub-agreement with the original software vendor. But we will have to have agreements with those, I guess we'll have to call them our customers, with our customers about what our responsibilities are and what their responsibilities are. And so those agreements will have to be made with each jurisdiction that we have those agreements with. Otherwise, it has to happen that way, otherwise it wouldn't be clear for anybody.
Sure.
So, particularly in the public safety realm. Good question, sir.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't want to do this?
I cannot think of one. Right?
It's like a good question to ask.
This really is this is the kind of thing that makes a dramatic difference in the city's long-term economic development. This will allow us to be a technologically competent and highly attractive spot for businesses. We're going to dramatically increase our technical capacity, both in telecommunications and in other fields as well. This is an absolute win for Pittsburgh in almost every way I can think of it.
Where does this place us with other communities in southeast Kansas, southwest Missouri? I mean, what other communities are doing this? I
don't think anybody else has this level of internet provider service.
Jay,
Sure, go ahead, Zach.
Zach Adams, Crockett Telephone. To completely answer your question about other services, we also will be offering voice and cable TV services along with data.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
That's just an example of all the different services that are going to be available through all these providers. So we're going to be in a good
giving the community more opportunity, more choices, and in turn, we as a municipality will build upon this for other goals that we have.
This is creating the environment that we need to have to be able to continue to grow in the future. Right? It's really setting us apart.
Why is it that other communities haven't done this yet?
There's some geographical functions to that. I mean, we're,
I know somebody has to foot the bill, and I'm sure that plays into it, and so I'm not diminishing that. I'm just saying if it's so advantageous and there's analysis that has to be done on the front end to see if there's interest, are those other communities not doing that already and seeing if there's interest for these services? And if so, why aren't those services being offered in other communities in the same fashion that we're planning on doing it right
Can I
now?
take a, strictly from an administrative point, of the amount of work that Jay and Henry have had to do to create 3 competitors who are all willing to come to Pittsburgh at the exact same time and literally negotiate franchise fees for how they're going to do business, knowing that they're going to be in competition, in which, as you defined, everybody's trying to get the advantage. I think the biggest reason, I don't know why it hasn't happened anywhere else, but I have a feeling it's because, and if it has happened somewhere else and they didn't share their agreements with us, I want to have a talk with them because we
I've
went
asked,
over
I asked,
this.
all right.
This was really created from the ground up, but it was also created because of the willingness of these 3 entities to work with us, knowing that Pittsburgh is a good market for it. And it wasn't easy to make it happen, and I'm thrilled. I think there's a lot of attention given to it today because it is, I think, a big deal, and it shows that you don't have to be Johnson County or Shawnee County to get the attention of people that are in this business, and they're going to make money, and hopefully the competition is going to allow us to have products that we can afford in this community. And I think it's probably not being done because it was so much work to get it to this point. I don't know. I'm amazed that we're actually having this conversation because I know Jay had a bunch of hair when he started this. If you see him, he's about out. So it's done,
Well, I appreciate that answer, and that does make sense. I just have one more question. How does it play into the university and what the university's needs are?
The university is served by an entirely separate provider, CanRen, all right, and that serves the entire Regents University network, all right. So it's a different provider.
This won't have any effect on
it won't. I mean, it
except
is
from a student standpoint in their residential housing.
Well, it is a potential source for a redundant connection for them as well. So that you can't rule that out as well. So if you guys are listening to me, so that's a possibility for them as well. And as far as the circumstances, there's a lot of things that aligned here. You know, the rulings at the federal level have kind of begun to start clarifying the state of telecommunications in the country. We're the biggest community in our region outside of in the state, of course, which allows us to be a relatively attractive market. The maturity of both CanRen, or excuse me, of CrawCan and Optic have reached a point where they are prepared to address a larger, more dense market. So there are a lot of things that happened simultaneously. We just took advantage of it and tried to coordinate it.
And hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate all the hard work you put into it.
Very, very good.
Okay. Any other questions?
Not to mine.
Take a short break before commission meeting. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
There you go. Bend over.